I bonded with Prince Achenra over our mutual fascination with Set. The prince continued to visit as I rose in ranks amongst the priests. Eventually, our friendship led to more. After we married, I had my beautiful boy. We named him Thutmose, after the studious god Thoth, hoping he would become a scholar like us. Though Thutmose took a different path, Achenra and I never lost our interest in the scrolls. We had become accomplished sorcerers and often sparred to maintain our skills. Achenra usually got the upper hand. But as my knowledge grew, I became increasingly disillusioned with Set. Despite his chaotic ways, Set was nothing more than a servant of Mot. He was no force against order. Even worse, the injustices of this world did not end with death. The underworld also preyed on the poor. Souls embarked on the path of the dead, dangerous trials which culminated in final judgment. The rich could afford expensive spells to ensure safe passage into the afterlife, while the poor could only hope that their deeds were pure enough to pass judgment. My father's spirit would never make it. But what if this pathway were torn down? If the judges were defeated, then the pathway to the afterlife would be open for everyone, rich or poor, saint or sinner. My parents. I scoured the archives for Apophis was the answer. The snake was capable of devouring the other gods. Perhaps he could consume the judges and open the path of the dead. The only god that stood in his way was Set. Within forbidden texts, I found litanies to the chaos snake. Invoking the rituals, Apophis appeared to me in a vision. We made a pact. If I helped him to defeat his arch-nemesis Set, Apophis agreed to devour the judges and open up the path of the dead. I awoke to my husband screaming at me. Achenra had found me sprawled out atop the heretical scrolls. I tried to convince Achenra of my plan, but he would not listen. Instead, he banished me. For the second time in my life, I abandoned my family. wandered between whispers and rumors, dusky taverns and remote settlements. I had to find others that thought like me, and eventually, I did. I proved my worth and was embraced by a secretive cult of Apophis worshippers. They kept to the shadows, hiding in the bluffs outside of Avaris. The cult's leader wielded a powerful artifact. He claimed it was a gift from Apophis himself that granted him everlasting life. I quickly rose within the ranks, but our leader never listened to my ideas. Instead of embracing the power of Apophis, he was content to keep the cult small, silent, and out of sight. I was not the only one who had aspirations for more. Shoot craved greater challenges, and Khamsin lusted after power and riches. Together, we betrayed our leader and fractured the amulet, one piece each, and still more than enough power for our schemes. And then, from the shadows, we watched, waited, and grew. When my spies reported that Pharaoh Akhenra was increasingly absent, I knew the time was ripe. I returned to the kingdom to reunite with my son. I cherished my chance to spend time with Thutmose again. When Akhenra returned, I hoped to reason with him. That would quickly prove impossible. Akhenra attacked me with his magic, but not at full strength. My husband was not trying to kill me. He was trying to scare me away. But Thutmose did not know that. My son intervened to save me, and accidentally struck down his father. I lost my husband. Another reason why I must succeed, to reconcile with Akhenra in the next life. In the years that followed, I siphoned resources from Thutmose's pyramid construction fund and the royal treasury. Apophis's cult grew rich, and the kingdom was none the wiser. Slowly but surely, I amassed a loyal cult following in the underbelly of Avaris. From the shadows, we plotted our insurrection to coincide with an upcoming eclipse. Taking Set's holy city of Avaris would stop his worship and erode some of his strength. Then, with all of the kingdom's resources to work with, I could find a way to defeat Set once and for all. In anticipation of the event, I directed Shoot to raid the kingdom's perimeter, forcing Thutmose to leave Avaris with the bulk of the garrison. My son would be safely out of the way during the coup. Khamsin's role was to conquer the fortress that defended Avaris, leaving Thutmose without stronghold or reinforcements. Then I would reason with my son. I knew he would understand once I explained everything. When the eclipse finally blotted out the sun, I invoked the rituals, summoning Apophis into the city. My cultists flooded the streets in a glorious frenzy. The revolution was nearly complete. go this way. Set manifested and destroyed Apophysis' avatar, releasing chaos magic through the city and driving everyone insane. Only my amulet protected me. Tutmos sacrificed himself to ensure my escape, but the clash between Set and Apophis had ravished Avaris. I had lost the kingdom and my followers, but worst of all, I lost my son. I buried Tutmos in his unfinished pyramid, sealing his body and soul until the afterlife was opened and my plan was complete. I found Shut's amulet on Tutmos' body. Khamsin and his amulet were nowhere to be found. Presumably, my allies had underestimated the pharaoh and paid the price. Without the completed amulet. Still, I can draw enough energy from my two artifacts to extend my life indefinitely. Long enough to defeat Set. For an eternity in the afterlife with my family, there is no price too high.